the morning sun filtered through the kitchen curtains of Margaret Chen's suburban home in Westchester County, New York, casting golden streaks across the marble countertop where she methodically prepared her morning coffee. At 62, Margaret had built a comfortable life through decades of careful financial planning and hard work as a senior accountant at a prestigious Manhattan firm. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed her monthly credit card statements, a habit she'd maintained for over 30 years. The kitchen door swung open with a familiar creak, and in walked Jessica, her daughter-in-law of 3 years. At 28, Jessica possessed the kind of effortless beauty that turned heads, long auburn hair that caught the light, emerald eyes that sparkled with what Margaret had once thought was warmth, and a smile that could charm anyone. This morning, however, there was something different about her demeanor, a nervous energy that made her movements seem calculated rather than natural. "Good morning, Mom," Jessica said, her voice carrying that sweet tone she always used when she wanted something. She poured herself orange juice from the refrigerator, her manicured nails, paid for with money she'd borrowed from Margaret last month, tapping against the glass. Margaret looked up from her statements, offering a tired smile. "Morning, dear. You're up early. Is David still sleeping?" "You know him," Jessica laughed, though it sounded forced. "He could sleep through a hurricane. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something before he wakes up." The older woman set down her papers, giving Jessica her full attention. Over the years, she'd grown accustomed to these private conversations. They usually involved money, Jessica needing help with her boutique that never seemed to turn a profit, or unexpected expenses that David's salary as a junior architect couldn't quite cover. Margaret had always helped, believing that family supported family, even when her own siblings warned her about enabling the young couple's spending habits. Jessica slid into the chair across from Margaret, her fingers playing with the ends of her hair, a nervous habit Margaret had noticed early in their relationship. "So, you know how my car has been having all those problems lately?" Margaret nodded. The 10-year-old Honda Civic had indeed seen better days, though it still ran perfectly fine according to her mechanic friend Tony, who'd inspected it just last month at Margaret's request. "Well, it finally died yesterday. Just completely gave out on Route 287. I had to have it towed, and the mechanic said it would cost more to fix than the car is worth." Jessica's eyes welled with tears, a performance Margaret had seen before, but still found difficult to resist. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you need me to call Tony? He might be able to—" "No," Jessica interrupted, then softened her tone. "I mean, I already handled it. I had to make a quick decision because I need a car for work, you know? The boutique's finally starting to pick up, and I have suppliers to meet, customers to visit." Margaret felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. "What kind of quick decision, Jessica?" The younger woman reached into her designer purse, another gift from Margaret last Christmas, and pulled out a set of car keys, dangling them with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "I bought a new car. Well, new to me. It's a 2022 BMW X3. I got an amazing deal. Mom, the dealer said it was a one-day special, and if I didn't act fast, someone else would snatch it up." The coffee mug in Margaret's hand trembled slightly. "A BMW? Jessica, those cars cost $48,000, Jessica finished, her words rushing out like water from a broken dam. "But listen, before you say anything, I want you to know that I plan to pay back every penny. The boutique is about to land this huge contract with a chain of hotels for custom decorations, and I'll be able to pay you back within 6 months, I promise." Margaret set down her mug with deliberate care, her accountant's mind already calculating. "Pay me back? Jessica, what exactly did you do?" The silence that followed stretched between them like a taut wire. Outside, a blue jay called from the oak tree in the backyard, its cry sharp in the morning air. Jessica's fingers moved from her hair to the edge of the table, tracing invisible patterns on the wood. "I used your credit card," she whispered, her eyes downcast. "The one you gave me for emergencies. This was an emergency, Mom. I couldn't get to work, couldn't meet with suppliers. I was going to lose everything I've worked for." Margaret felt the blood drain from her face. The emergency credit card. She'd given Jessica one connected to her account with a $50,000 limit, explicitly for medical emergencies or true crises. She'd trusted her daughter-in-law, believed in her promises to use it responsibly. "You spent $48,000 on a luxury car without asking me?" Margaret's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she reached for her credit card statements again, flipping to the most recent charges she hadn't yet reviewed. "I tried to call you yesterday, but you were in that board meeting all day, and the dealer said the deal would expire by 5 o'clock. I made a judgment call, Mom. I thought you'd understand. You've always said, family helps family." There it was, on the statement. BMW of Manhattan, $48,000. The charge had gone through yesterday at 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the supposed deadline. Margaret stared at the number, her mind reeling not just from the amount, but from the betrayal. This wasn't a few $100s for groceries or even $1,000 for car repairs. This was a year's worth of savings, money she'd earmarked for her retirement trip to Europe, gone in a single impulsive purchase. "Jessica," Margaret began, her voice low and controlled, the voice she used in board meetings when someone had made a grave error. "Do you understand what you've done? This isn't just about the money. You've violated my trust. You've committed credit card fraud." Jessica's tears came freely now, running down her cheeks in perfect rivulets that didn't disturb her mascara. "Waterproof," Margaret noted with bitter irony. "Please don't say that. I'm family. I made a mistake, but I'm going to fix it. The boutique has been losing money for 2 years," Margaret interrupted. "I've seen the books, Jessica. I helped you with your taxes, remember? There is no hotel contract, is there?" The younger woman's face crumpled, but there was something else in her expression, a flicker of defiance that Margaret had never seen before. "You don't understand what it's like, always having to ask for money, always feeling like a charity case. I work hard, but nothing ever seems to be enough. You have so much, Mom. This house, your retirement accounts, your investments. I thought you'd want me to have something nice too." "By stealing from me?" Margaret's voice rose despite her efforts to control it. "Because that's what this is, Jessica. Theft. I'm your daughter-in-law." Jessica stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm married to your son. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Margaret stood as well, her 5'4" frame straight and dignified despite the trembling in her limbs. "It meant everything to me, which is why this hurts so much." She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving to the credit card app. "I'm canceling this card immediately and disputing the charge." "You can't do that." Jessica's mask finally slipped completely, revealing something ugly underneath the beautiful facade. "The car's already in my name. I signed the papers. If you dispute it, I'll be in legal trouble." "You should have thought of that before you stole from me," Margaret replied, her finger hovering over the report fraud button. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made both women freeze. David appeared in the doorway, his hair disheveled from sleep, his face confused as he took in the scene, his mother and wife facing off across the kitchen like adversaries. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. His eyes moved between the two women, noting his mother's pale face and his wife's tears. "Mom? Jess?" Jessica moved quickly, throwing herself into her husband's arms. "David, your mother's threatening to ruin my life over a misunderstanding. I bought a car. For us. For our future. And she's calling me a thief." David's arms automatically wrapped around his wife, but his eyes sought his mother's face. Margaret saw the moment understanding dawned in her son's expression. He'd grown up watching her manage finances, had inherited her careful nature with money. He knew his mother never made accusations lightly. "Jess," he said slowly, pulling back to look at his wife's face. "What did you do?" "I used the emergency credit card to buy a car," Jessica admitted, her voice small. "But I'm going to pay it back, I swear." David's face went through a series of expressions, shock, disappointment, anger, before settling on something that looked like resignation. This wasn't the first time Jessica had crossed financial boundaries, Margaret realized. Her son had been dealing with this privately, trying to manage his wife's spending without involving his mother. $48,000, Margaret said quietly. "A BMW X3. David physically recoiled, stepping away from Jessica. 48. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I'll pay you back. I'll take out a loan, work overtime." "No," Margaret interrupted, her decision crystallizing in that moment. "This is between Jessica and me. She made this choice alone, and she'll face the consequences alone." "Mom, please," David pleaded. "She made a mistake. We can work this out as a family." Margaret looked at her son, her only child, the boy she'd raised alone after his father's death, the young man who'd made her so proud when he'd graduated from architecture school. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the war between his love for his wife and his respect for his mother. "David, I love you more than words can express," she said softly. "But your wife committed fraud. She stole from me. If I let this go, what's next? The house? My retirement accounts? Where does it end?" "It ends here," Jessica interjected, her tears drying as anger took over. "I made one mistake. One. And you're ready to destroy my life over it. Some mother you are." "You're right," Margaret said, her voice steady now. "I am a mother, which is why I know that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the right thing." She turned to her phone, opening the credit card app. "I'm canceling this card and reporting the fraudulent charge. You have 24 hours to figure out how to return the car and get my money back. Or I'll be forced to involve the police." "Mom!" David's voice cracked. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life, Margaret replied. She looked at Jessica, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time, not as the charming young woman who'd swept her son off his feet, but as someone who'd seen an easy mark and taken advantage. 24 hours, Jessica. That's more grace than you showed me when you stole my credit card. Jessica's face contorted with rage. You'll regret this. David, tell her. Tell her she's making a huge mistake. But David was silent, his face a mask of pain as he looked between the two women he loved most in the world. The kitchen that had hosted so many family dinners, so many celebrations, now felt like a courtroom where verdicts were being handed down. Margaret gathered her credit card statements, her movements deliberate and calm despite the storm raging inside her. I'll be in my study making the necessary calls. David, you're welcome to stay, but Jessica needs to leave my house. Now. Your house? Jessica spat. This is our home too. No, Margaret corrected. This is my house. You and David live here because I welcomed you, because I wanted to help you save money while you got established. That invitation is hereby revoked. She walked past them toward her study, her slippers silent on the hardwood floor. Behind her, she heard Jessica's voice rising in hysteria, David's attempts to calm her, the sound of something breaking, a glass or a plate thrown in anger. But Margaret didn't turn back. She'd spent her life building security for herself and her family, and she wouldn't let anyone, not even family, tear it down. As she closed the study door behind her, Margaret caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. She looked older than her 62 years, worn down by the betrayal, but there was also steel in her spine, the same strength that had carried her through her husband's death, through raising David alone, through building a career in a male-dominated field. She sat at her desk, pulled out her phone, and began to dial the credit card company. Outside her window, the blue jay called again, its cry now sounding like a warning she should have heeded long ago. But it wasn't too late. It was never too late to stand up for what was right, even when it meant standing alone. The phone rang once, twice, and then a customer service representative answered. Good morning, this is American Express. How may I help you today? Margaret took a deep breath, her voice steady and clear. I need to report a fraudulent charge on my account. As she began to explain the situation, she heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, she saw Jessica throwing suitcases into the trunk of her new BMW, the car that had cost so much more than money. It had cost a family its unity, a mother her trust, and a son his peace. But sometimes, Margaret knew, the price of justice was worth paying, even when it broke your heart. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, indifferent to the drama unfolding in the suburban home below. Life would go on, as it always did, but it would never be the same. Margaret ended her call with the credit card company and prepared for the next one, to her lawyer. If Jessica thought she could manipulate her way out of this, she was about to learn that Margaret Chen hadn't survived and thrived for 62 years by being anyone's fool. The study door opened, and David stood there, his face drawn and pale. Mom, he said quietly. She's gone. She took the car and left. Margaret looked at her son, seeing the pain etched in every line of his face. She opened her arms, and he came to her like he had as a child, seeking comfort in his mother's embrace. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have seen this coming. There were signs, things I ignored because I loved her. Love makes us blind sometimes, Margaret murmured, stroking his hair. But it shouldn't make us stupid, and it should never make us cruel. They stood there together, mother and son, as the morning transformed into afternoon. Outside, life in suburban Westchester continued its predictable rhythm. But inside the Chen house, everything had changed. The perfect facade had cracked, revealing the ugly truth beneath. And sometimes, Margaret knew, the truth was the only foundation worth building on, even when it meant starting over from ruins. Tentar novamente gok editar. Chapter 2. The Unraveling. The law offices of Brennan and Associates occupied the 10th floor of a gleaming office building in White Plains, just a 20-minute drive from Margaret's home. She sat in the waiting area, her hands folded neatly in her lap, watching the rain streak down the floor-to-ceiling windows. It had been 18 hours since Jessica had driven away in the stolen BMW, and Margaret hadn't slept more than an hour. David had stayed up with her, making calls to Jessica that went unanswered, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly desperate as the night wore on. Mrs. Chen? A paralegal appeared in the doorway. Mr. Brennan will see you now. Thomas Brennan had been Margaret's attorney for 15 years, handling everything from her will to the legal intricacies of her late husband's estate. He was a tall man in his 70s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the sort of lawyer who still believed in handshakes and keeping his word. He rose as she entered, gesturing to the leather chairs arranged around a small conference table. Margaret, I'm sorry to see you under these circumstances, he said, pouring water from a crystal pitcher. Your message sounded urgent. Tell me what's happened. Margaret laid out the facts methodically, the way she'd present a financial report. The emergency credit card, the unauthorized purchase, Jessica's admission, the 24-hour ultimatum that would expire in just 6 hours. Thomas took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions, his expression growing more serious with each detail. The first thing you need to understand, he said when she finished, is that you're absolutely within your rights to pursue this as credit card fraud. The fact that she's family makes it emotionally complicated, but not legally. She used your card without permission for a purchase that clearly exceeds any reasonable interpretation of emergency. That's theft. But, Margaret sensed hesitation in his voice. But, Thomas continued, removing his glasses to clean them, a gesture Margaret recognized as his way of buying time to choose his words carefully. Prosecuting family members rarely ends well for anyone involved. The emotional toll, the family divisions, the public nature of criminal proceedings, I've seen it destroy families permanently. Are you prepared for that? Margaret thought of David's face that morning, hollow-eyed and defeated as he'd tried once more to reach his wife. My family is already destroyed, Tom. The question is whether I let Jessica get away with it or hold her accountable. There might be a middle ground, Thomas suggested. A civil suit rather than criminal charges. You could sue for the return of the money without involving the police. It's less public, potentially less damaging to family relationships, but still holds her accountable. Before Margaret could respond, her phone buzzed. David's name appeared on the screen along with a text. Mom, please come home immediately. Jessica is here with someone. I think you need to see this. Margaret showed the message to Thomas, who frowned. Would you like me to come with you? If she's brought someone, it might be her own attorney. No, Margaret decided after a moment's thought. But stay available? I have a feeling I might need you soon. The drive home seemed longer than usual, the rain making the roads slick and dangerous. Margaret's mind raced through possibilities. Had Jessica come to return the car, to apologize? Or was this another manipulation, another performance designed to avoid consequences? She pulled into her driveway to find 3 cars, David's sedan, the infamous BMW, and a black Mercedes she didn't recognize. Through the living room window, she could see figures moving inside her house where Jessica was no longer welcome. The audacity of it made her grip the steering wheel tighter. Margaret entered through the front door to find a scene that made her stop short. Jessica sat on the couch, looking immaculate in a designer suit Margaret had never seen before. Beside her sat a middle-aged man with an expensive haircut and an even more expensive suit, definitely a lawyer. But it was the third person who made Margaret's blood run cold. Hello, Margaret, said Eleanor Morrison, Jessica's mother. The woman was an older version of her daughter. Same auburn hair, though clearly maintained by an expensive colorist. Same green eyes, same practiced smile that never quite reached those eyes. I think it's time we had a family discussion about this misunderstanding. David stood by the fireplace, his posture rigid with discomfort. He met his mother's eyes with an apologetic look that said he'd had no choice but to let them in. Margaret understood. He was still Jessica's husband, still bound by the complex loyalties of marriage, even as those bonds frayed. There's no misunderstanding, Margaret said, remaining standing. Jessica stole $48,000 from me. She checked her watch, 5 hours and 20 minutes to return it. The man in the expensive suit cleared his throat. Mrs. Chen, I'm Robert Hartley from Hartley, Crane and Associates. I represent Mrs. Jessica Chen in this matter. I think you'll find that the situation is not as clear-cut as you believe. Is that so? Margaret kept her voice level, though inside she felt her anger building. They'd come prepared, lawyered up, ready to fight, which meant Jessica had no intention of returning the money. Indeed, Hartley continued, producing a folder from his briefcase. My client informs me that she's been serving as an unpaid household manager for your home for the past 3 years. Cooking, cleaning, organizing social events, caring for you during your recovery from knee surgery last year. We've calculated the value of these services at approximately $55,000. Margaret actually laughed, a short, sharp sound that cut through the room like a knife. Unpaid household manager? She lives in my house rent-free, eats my food, uses my utilities. I've given her thousands of dollars for her boutique, paid for her clothes, her salon visits, her vacations with my son. And now you're trying to tell me she deserves a salary on top of that? Eleanor leaned forward, her voice honeyed with false concern. Margaret, dear, I understand you're upset, but Jessica is your daughter-in-law. When she married David, she became your family, and family doesn't keep score like this. The car was a necessity for her work. Work that will benefit your son's household. Surely you can see that. What I see, Margaret replied, is a con artist who raised another con artist. The apple clearly didn't fall far from the tree. Eleanor's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something vicious underneath. How dare you? How dare I? Margaret's voice rose. Your daughter stole from me, committed fraud, and instead of apologizing, instead of trying to make it right, you show up at my house with a lawyer trying to justify theft with some fabricated claim about household services? Get out. All of you. Now. Mom. David spoke for the first time, his voice strained. Maybe we should hear them out. Maybe there's a solution. The solution, Margaret said firmly, is for Jessica to return the car and the money. That's it. There's no negotiation here. Hartley stood, his expression shifting to something more threatening. Mrs. Chen, if you pursue fraud charges against my client, we'll be forced to countersue for the wages owed, emotional distress, and defamation. You'll spend years in court and tens of thousands in legal fees. Is that really what you want? Margaret pulled out her phone. What I want is for thieves to face consequences. She began dialing. Since you clearly have no intention of returning the money, I'm calling the police. Wait, Jessica stood abruptly. And for the first time, Margaret saw real fear in her eyes. Just wait, please. The room fell silent except for the rain against the windows. Jessica looked at her mother, then at her lawyer, and finally at David. Whatever she saw in her husband's face made her shoulders slump. I can't return the car, she admitted quietly. I already traded it in. What? David's voice was sharp with disbelief. You just bought it yesterday. Jessica's carefully constructed composure began to crumble. I needed something more practical, so I traded the X3 for a Range Rover. It was only $15,000 more, and they gave me such a good deal. $15,000 more? Margaret felt the room spin slightly. So you've now stolen $63,000 from me? Eleanor stood, moving to her daughter's side. She didn't steal anything. She made a financial decision for the family. Shut up, Margaret said coldly, surprising everyone, including herself. Eleanor, you've clearly taught your daughter that taking what doesn't belong to her is acceptable as long as she can justify it with enough lies and manipulation. But I'm done playing this game. She turned to Hartley. You have two choices. You can advise your client to liquidate whatever assets she has to pay me back immediately, or you can explain to her what happens when someone commits credit card fraud across state lines, because that BMW dealership is in New Jersey, which makes this a federal crime. The lawyer's face paled slightly. He'd clearly thought he was dealing with an emotional older woman who could be intimidated. He hadn't expected someone who understood the law and wasn't afraid to use it. Furthermore, Margaret continued, building momentum, I've already spoken with American Express. They've launched their own investigation. Credit card companies don't take kindly to fraud, especially not for amounts over $50,000. They will pursue this criminally, whether I do or not. This was partially a bluff. While she had reported the fraud, she wasn't certain of American Express's policies. But she'd learned long ago that confidence was half the battle in any negotiation. Jessica sank back onto the couch, real tears flowing now. I just wanted something nice. Everyone else has nice things. You have nice things. Why couldn't I have something nice? Because you can't afford it, Margaret said simply. That's how life works. You earn, you save, you buy what you can afford. You don't steal from others because you feel entitled to luxuries. Eleanor's face flushed red. How sanctimonious of you, sitting in your big house, judging others. You probably inherited everything from your dead husband anyway. The room went very still. David made a sound like he'd been punched. Even Hartley looked uncomfortable at the cruel comment. Margaret straightened her spine. I was 28 when my husband died, Jessica's age. I had a 2-year-old son and a mortgage I could barely afford. I worked 60-hour weeks for 30 years to build what I have. Every dollar in my bank account I earned. Every promotion I fought for. Every sacrifice I made willingly for my son's future. She looked directly at Jessica. So don't you dare sit there and act like a victim because you can't have a luxury car you didn't earn? David, Jessica turned to her husband, desperation clear in her voice. Say something. Defend me. She's your mother. Make her understand. David looked at his wife for a long moment, and Margaret saw him seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. The manipulation, the entitlement, the complete lack of remorse. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. Understand what, Jess? That you stole $63,000? That you've been lying to me about money for who knows how long? That you brought your mother and a lawyer to intimidate my mom in her own home? He shook his head slowly. I understand perfectly. I've just been too blind to see it before. David! Jessica's voice rose to a shriek. You're taking her side? I'm your wife, and she's my mother. David replied. The woman who raised me alone, who sacrificed everything for me, who welcomed you into her home and treated you like a daughter, and you repaid her by stealing from her. Eleanor grabbed her daughter's arm. Come on, Jessica. We're leaving. Let them stew in their righteousness. But this isn't over. Hartley gathered his papers, his expression professionally neutral. We'll be in touch, Mrs. Chen. I'd advise you to retain counsel. Already done, Margaret replied coolly. Thomas Brennan of Brennan and Associates. I'm sure you know the firm. She saw Hartley's slight wince. Yes, he knew the firm. Thomas Brennan had a reputation for being both ethical and relentless. Not an easy combination to beat in court. The trio moved toward the door, Jessica sobbing dramatically, Eleanor muttering about ingratitude and cruelty, Hartley maintaining his professional silence. At the threshold, Jessica turned back one last time. David, she pleaded, don't let her do this. Come with me. We can work this out together, away from her poison. David didn't move from his spot by the fireplace. The only poison here is greed, Jessica, and lies and theft. I'll have your things packed and sent to your mother's house. Jessica's face transformed from pitiful to furious in an instant. You'll regret this, both of you. I'll take you for everything in the divorce. You'll see. And then they were gone, leaving only the sound of rain and the lingering tension in the air. Margaret and David stood in silence for a moment before David crossed the room and pulled his mother into a fierce hug. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. Should have protected you from her. Oh, my dear boy, Margaret murmured, holding him as he shook with the effort of controlling his emotions. You loved her. That's not a crime. Trusting someone you love isn't a weakness. But I let her hurt you. David pulled back, his eyes wet. I brought her into your life. This is my fault. No, Margaret said firmly. Her choices are her fault. Her actions are her responsibility. You're as much a victim here as I am. They sat together on the couch Jessica had just vacated, the afternoon light fading as the rain continued. Margaret told David about her visit to Thomas Brennan, about the options ahead. David listened, occasionally asking questions, his analytical mind already working through the implications. She mentioned divorce, he said eventually. I suppose that's inevitable now. I'll need a lawyer, too. Thomas can recommend someone, Margaret assured him. And David? Whatever happens, we'll get through it together. That's what real family does. David managed a weak smile. No invoice for services rendered? Never, Margaret smiled back, the first genuine smile she'd managed all day. As evening approached, they ordered Chinese food from their favorite local restaurant, comfort food for a comfortless day. While they waited for delivery, Margaret's phone rang. Thomas Brennan's name appeared on the screen. Margaret, I just received an interesting call from Robert Hartley, Thomas said without preamble. He's fishing for a settlement. Apparently, your threat about federal charges hit home. They know American Express will pursue this aggressively, and that's not something they can intimidate their way out of. What kind of settlement? Margaret asked, putting the phone on speaker so David could hear. They're offering to return $30,000 if you drop all charges and sign a non-disclosure agreement. $30,000? David exclaimed. She stole 63. Their argument, Thomas continued, is that the car has already depreciated, and they're claiming the difference as compensation for Jessica's services. It's ridiculous. But it's an opening position. They're scared, Margaret. This is good news. I want every penny back, Margaret said firmly. And I won't sign any NDA. If they want to avoid criminal charges, they need to make me whole. Period. I'll convey that, Thomas said. And Margaret, well done today. Standing firm was exactly the right move. Bullies like Hartley only understand strength. After Thomas hung up, Margaret and David sat in companionable silence, waiting for their food. The rain had finally stopped, and weak sunlight broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the living room. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if Jessica's departure had removed more than just her physical presence. Mom, David said suddenly, when this is over, when we've dealt with all the legal stuff, would it be okay if I stayed here for a while, just until I figure out what comes next? Margaret reached over and squeezed his hand. This is your home, David. It always has been, and it always will be. Stay as long as you need. The doorbell rang. Their food had arrived. As David went to answer it, Margaret reflected on the day's events. She'd lost a daughter-in-law she'd thought she'd loved, but she'd gained something too. The knowledge that she could still stand up for herself, still fight when necessary, still protect what she'd worked so hard to build. The Chinese food was warm and comforting, filling the kitchen with familiar aromas. As they ate, David told her things he'd kept hidden. Jessica's secret credit cards, the shopping sprees he'd discovered, the lies about money she'd been telling for months. Each revelation was painful, but also cathartic. The truth, however ugly, was better than the beautiful lie they'd been living. "We'll get through this," Margaret said again, and this time she truly believed it. Tomorrow would bring more challenges: legal negotiations, family drama, the messy business of untangling Jessica from their lives. But tonight, it was just a mother and son, sharing a meal, and the quiet understanding that some bonds couldn't be broken, no matter who tried to tear them apart. As they cleared the dishes, Margaret's phone buzzed with another text from Thomas. Hartley just called back. "They're up to 45,000. "We're getting there." She showed it to David, who nodded grimly. "Make them pay it all, Mom. Every penny." "I intend to," Margaret replied. And she would. Because sometimes the only way to stop a thief was to make stealing too expensive to be worth it. Jessica had thought she'd found an easy mark, a pushover who would forgive anything in the name of family harmony. She was about to learn just how wrong she'd been. The sun set completely, plunging the house into evening darkness. Margaret turned on the lights, illuminating the space that had been her sanctuary for so many years. It still was, she realized. Jessica might have tried to poison it with her greed and manipulation, but she'd failed. This was still home, still safe, still hers. And tomorrow, the real fight would begin.